Well, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out for the program. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So before we get into the good work you're doing, I want to know this. 6 years ago, this pandemic really put us at a fork in the road. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you work and live today?
Yeah. The pandemic hit me and my family at an interesting time. So I've been doing ministry for about 20 years. So my life has always been non traditional. My vocational has always looked a little different. Uh, but coming into just before the pandemic, I was working at a ministry where it ended up being a toxic environment, ended up losing the job unjustly, ended up finding myself unemployed. And from that place of unemployment, I ended up shifting into full time volunteer ministry, meaning I haven't gotten a paycheck since 2018.
Wow.
My family joined me in a training that we went through shortly after that, which led us right up into the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, we had already been living out what a lot of people had thrust upon them. Both of us had already transitioned out of our traditional jobs. So when people were losing jobs, we're like, we already know what that's like.
Yeah.
We had already been separated from families and friends during a period of training. So we already knew what it meant to be isolated as a family. Uh, Even like the income piece, unknowns of what's going to happen financially, we had already been navigating that. So when the pandemic hit, we're like, oh, we are uniquely poised for this. But for me specifically, one of the things that began to happen that was different than before was the lean into creating various forms of content. I had always been creating content. I mean, when I was a kid, my dad growing up had one of those huge cameras that was tethered to a VCR that you carried in a satchel. Right? I'm taking it way back. And I would create movies with my friends. I've always loved creating. But beginning in 2019, I had this clear sense that writing was going to be a bigger part of what I was doing. Um, I felt like I was going to shift away from video to audio, and more importantly, not audio in terms of podcasting, even though that was the end result, but capturing conversations, capturing real stories, capturing real dialogue between two people, not an interview, not something with an agenda, but two people actually connecting. And the pandemic ended up creating an unexpected push because whereas I was doing that on a very local level, I've always been very locally driven. The pandemic opened up opportunities to stretch beyond the local, to stretch globally, even to connect with people in places of the world that I may never even go. And so it was very interesting to see how this thing that could have created a lot of isolation, could have created a lot of disconnection, actually did the opposite for me, created more connection, more integration. And as things kind of return to whatever we want to call normal, uh, I remained in this space of having these global touch points, of having this global mindset of the stuff that I create isn't just for the people around me, but could be for people that I may not only never meet, but never know they even touched one of my books or listened to one of my episodes. And that's a different way of functioning, right? Like if you
Yeah.
can't see the impact, right, it can feel like, what am I even doing? But to be willing to lean into a space where I don't have to know what happens from here. I just need to know, was I faithful to show up as I needed to show up? Was I operating with integrity and authenticity? Is what I created something real that I believe has value? And then if something happens beyond it, fantastic. But there could be something rewarding even in that one little bit. I've been living in that space, and sometimes it's still challenging, but it's also been refreshing and freeing in many ways.
Did you ever watch the show Monk?
Oh, I love Monk. And I also just recently got into Psych, which is like a
Yeah.
little partner show,
Uh-huh.
but I
Yeah.
love Monk, love Monk.
So did you see they did a movie during the pandemic. Did you
Hmm.
see that?
I did, yeah.
Okay, so the part that was the most profound when we all kind of wonder what kind of wield of influence we have and why we do what we do. There was that part where he was on the park bench at the end and he was like, why have I been doing this? And all
Mm,
of the ghosts of all of the relatives were lined up and said, because you solved this,
hmm.
you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
all of those little
yeah,
daisy chains of things that ripple out in the proverbial pond, that part of that movie was totally profound because I
yeah.
think there's points where we're all working so hard at what we're doing, we're inside the peanut butter jar and we don't see the label. We're like, what
Hmm.
what are we doing? But that part in that movie was was so profound because you felt the agony. Because we've watched the shows and he's dealing with really dark human parts of what
Mhm.
we're of the human experience. But because of what he's doing, he's creating all this life, creating all this light, which was pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we limit our imagination so often. We limit our creativity so often. And the area where we do it most is when we forecast out how life is supposed to be,
yeah,
what's supposed to happen, what's supposed to be the fruit of my efforts. And we create this very, very narrow picture that when we're not hitting that, then what are we even doing?
yeah,
Why are we even doing this? What's the value? And so I think that's a beautiful image. Like here's Monk who spent so much of his life doing these things where oftentimes there isn't the happy ending. Even if he figures out who did
yeah.
the crimes still happen.
Uh-huh.
There's still brokenness and heartache. But yeah, I agree with you. That image of the impact that it could have on others that he doesn't get to see.
Yep.
And so we have to broaden our imaginations. We can forecast things out, but we should hold our plans loosely. You know, you talked about the pandemic. I'm surprised we still haven't learned this truth after that happened because coming into 2020, a whole lot of people had plans, had expectations, and they had it mapped out. They knew exactly what was going to happen in 2020, how they were going to get this promotion, or how their income was going to increase. Or the one that I laugh at the most is all the entities that had 5-year plans
Yeah.
that came into 2020 and they were just, I mean, had to be thrown in the trash.
Yeah.
And we should have learned then that the reality is we never know what could be around the corner,
Yep.
right? And so we can plan things out, we can strategize. That's all great skill sets, but we have to hold it loosely because if we don't and the pivot happens, we could end up crumbling, getting angry, responding in any number of ways that aren't actually helpful and productive. Versus if we hold things loosely, we could be upset, but then say, but where can we go from here? And I've been so encouraged by the individuals and entities that were ready to do that pivot, that said, this has always been who we are, but now we can't interact with people in person. Well, how can we still do what we're doing? How can we still bring meaningful change or impact? And people who are willing to pivot, they found something new or they found something deeper. Um, and so, yeah, I think we've got to expand our imagination. We got to
Yep.
expand our creativity if we actually want to keep moving forward in this world that you and I know keeps getting crazier and crazier. You and I were talking before that right now I can't go outside because there is smoke from wildfires that are in Canada,
Yeah.
not even close to us. But now my life is impacted by something very far away from me.
Yep.
That's a reality of life. We can be impacted at things that we can't control, couldn't have foreseen,
Hmm.
but that shouldn't stop us.
Right. Absolutely. So let's get into the work that you do on a daily basis. I'm going to put you in front of 13-year-olds. You're at career day, and one of the kids wants you to synthesize what your work is.
Mhm.
How do you explain it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to synthesize it even to adults because, as I noted, my life's been very untraditional. So, put simply, what I seek to do every day is to love my neighbors. Now, if I'm talking to a church or ministry or anyone that identifies as Christian, I can get a little deeper and talk about how the Bible talks about this call to love God and love others. That's the core of what I'm trying to do. But on a basic level, I just want to love my neighbors. And what that looks like for most of my life would have been a specific job title and specific projects and tasks, and that could be good. You know, you talk about jazz a lot. I feel like that's what my life is I have a framework for the instruments that I play,
Yeah.
you know, connecting with neighbors, writing, cultivating conversations on the podcast. Like the tagline that I use often, and this is what I'm kind of weaving here, but I would say to the 13-year-old, what I'm trying to do each day is cultivate authentic, accessible space for people to process the hard questions of life. That's the core of it. Authentic, because I'm showing up real, not with an agenda like, okay, if I can connect with this person, then this could raise my income. This could raise my influence. No, no, no. I just want to show up with that person. And accessible, I want it to be as equally valuable a space to that 13-year-old as someone who is 33. You know, someone who has all the degrees and someone who didn't finish third grade. Like, how can I cultivate spaces that can meet anyone where they are? But it does take the form of jazz because on any given day, it can look different.
Yeah.
It could look like writing a book, or it could look like having coffee on a porch with a neighbor who's really struggling with something. Um, the beauty of the format, where it is fluid, means that I'm not bound to a specific project or specific hours, that I can show up where I'm needed, as I'm needed, who I'm needed to be on any given day. And some days it's required me to show up in ways that I wouldn't have wanted to. I have a friend who has been unhoused for most of his life. And for 2 years, I ended up being functionally his primary caregiver. And he's 68-year-old man. Most of his family is really disconnected from him. There were days where I thought I might go to where he was sleeping and find him dead, right? Like, in a traditional job, I wouldn't have had the bandwidth to do that.
Yeah.
Um, in the role that I have, I can, but it doesn't change the fact that, like, I don't want to come across a dead body,
Yeah.
nor would I know what to do if I did. And so, this short, concise answer to that 13-year-old is, I'm just trying to be willing to show up as I'm needed when I'm needed. Um, for me, part of that is trusting God to give some of the guidance in that. But as a human, it also is being willing to be bold and courageous, regardless if I feel like I know what I'm doing. To be willing to love, even if it's going to cost me. Um, but at the end of the day, it's that space. I might not see the end goal. I might
Yeah.
not see the results of it. I've had plenty of interactions in person that I didn't get to see it. So how much more so the books, that are out there, the podcast episodes that are being heard. I may never know, but if I can know that I at least was faithful to create that space so that somebody somewhere in the world who felt alone, unseen, unheard, that in that moment they can feel like they're not alone, that they're not unseen, that they're not unheard, then I'm happy with that. I'm good
Yeah.
with that, even if I don't ever see a penny from it.
For sure. So what did you want to be when you were a kid? When you were that age, what
Oh,
was your
yeah.
dream job?
Oh, man. I went through a few cycles. I loved the Far Side comics. And so there
Yeah.
was a
Oh
period of
yeah.
time where I wanted to be a cartoonist. That didn't last too long, but it was there. I love animals. I grew up on 10 acres and we had a myriad of animals, from a pony to a goose to chickens to dogs, cats, a guinea pig. We had a mix of things. And I thought I might be a vet, but the idea of being the one that had to make the decision to put an animal down,
Yeah.
that was hard for my young brain to like get behind. Uh, so I was always pretty flexible and open. I never really knew what I would be. Um, and so when I finally landed on, I mentioned I've been doing ministry for a couple decades now. Even when that thought got in my mind around age of 13, 14, 15, I still didn't even know what that meant. I had very little context. So I've always been the type that was not locked into, this is the job title I will have. This is who I will be in the world. I've always just had this sense of, I just want to show up authentically in the world
Yeah.
and whatever I'm doing, but hopefully it's something I enjoy and am good at.
Yeah. So take me back to your childhood. What were the influences, the seeds that were planted that have allowed you to have this non-traditional kind of work existence, to be spiritual, to be
Yeah.
creative? How did this happen?
Yeah. So I have to give my mom credit for a lot of things. You talked about creativity. My mom has always been creative. I've got a painting right beside me that she made, I think, when she was like 10. She's always loved painting, sketching, drawing, but it's never been for income generation or acclaim. It's just been something she loved doing. And so she just did. And so that humble approach to creativity was planted in me early on. Um, my faith as well, like my mom always took me to church. And so when I was a kid, I didn't necessarily want to go. And I would be like doodling on the, what is it called? I always blank on the thing that you get, the papers that you get. I should know the name of it. Or joking with my brother in the back row. But she had this consistency, and to her credit, all these things that she was building in me, she had to do at a heftier level than she expected because my dad passed away when I was 5. And so when we talk about creativity, that also included she had to figure out if something broke in the house. Like there was a season where it was on her to figure out what to do with it. And she was always very creative with her problem solving. So that was ingrained in me. And so got to give my mom a lot of credit and just her faithfulness to be present in my life all the way up to today. Like she was reaching out, we connected today briefly. Um, so I think that's part of it. I also think within me, I've never been one who needed to be like everyone else. Like being trendy was never a desire of mine. In fact, sometimes if something is trendy, it's actually off-putting to me.
Yeah.
uh, I've also never, I'm not veering on the other end either, that I always wanted to be different and always wanted to look different to others. But there's always been this deep down sense of me of figuring out who I actually am and just being that and not changing it based on what others want me to be. And sometimes that's great. Sometimes that's beautiful. Sometimes it worked out really well for me in high school, and sometimes it didn't. Sometimes not being trendy can make you feel isolated and disconnected. But I always had uh, good friends who did value who I was and celebrated who I was and appreciated who I was, and vice versa. And so I think that also set a good foundation as well for me to then enter life not being bound to what I'm supposed to do. Because let's be honest, I'm a husband and a father. I'm supposed to have a job that gives guaranteed stable income, ideally a hefty amount of income. For many people, because I'm, the father and the husband and the male, I should be the breadwinner, right? And or you have to have a job that has this admirable title and responsibility so you can stand out in the world, because we live in a culture where there are certain jobs that are looked down on. And so there's all these factors that are expectations externally pushed on us that it's very easy for us to feel like we've got to align ourselves to. And I had an upbringing that uh, allowed me to not be bound to that, to be able to live out what it looks like to just figure out who I am and to live in that way, regardless of what other people are saying, doing. And so I've been able to have very untraditional vocational life for 2 decades, and I'm still going.
Yeah.
I'm still paying bills. But I think that's the other piece of it is the further I get in life and understand the nuances of this in ways that I didn't when I was young, um, the more I can see how that is negatively impacting others when they do feel that they have to adjust who they are to fit with where they are. They have to adjust what they do to fit to their context. And while there are some moments where there may be realities around that, there are many ways in which that's actually keeping us from being authentic, keeping us from being accessible. And so if I can then see that and then find ways to convey the freedom I found to others, even if our contexts are completely different, then that's exciting, because I want people to be able to find the fullness of life, not chase after this potential hypothetical life that, again, a pandemic can change in a moment.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Speaking of youth and being in that kind of idea of what you were going to be when you grew up, let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the 18-year-old version of you and you walk into a room and there's a film projector. You click play, 60-second highlight reel of your life comes up on the wall. Is that young version of you going to believe your life turned out this way?
Oh, it's fun. I laugh because I'm trying to even figure out what the this way would be.
Right.
What the main message of that 60 seconds would be, what that 18-year-old version of me would take away from it.
Yeah.
Um, because I still am trying to figure out what my life is, how like at the start, trying to explain what I do. I think it in some ways, it depends on how he's looking at it. It could be a very confusing short reel. I don't I don't think that would be the case though, because when I think back to that younger version of me, I was in a place where I was positioned for whatever might come. Again, I mentioned that I was thinking about going into ministry, but I didn't know what that would look like. So I'm in a context where I'm like, all right, well, I'm choosing to believe there is a God and I'm choosing to believe this God knows. So I'm just going to see what he throws at me. So I think that 18-year-old wouldn't, one, have firm expectations that if he didn't see it reflected on the film, he'd be upset. I think he would have this openness to say whatever's on there is probably what it's supposed to be. Um, but I would hope that in those highlights are moments that showed kind of what we were talking about earlier, that we're all raised being told this is what you're supposed to do, this is how you're supposed to live. So you need to get these grades so that you can get your degree, and then you need to figure out what job you're going to have, then you need to find the college that gets you set up best for that, then you need to graduate from that, then you need to get the job. Like, we are pushed into this trajectory of life that you and I know a lot of people didn't even go into the profession that they have a degree for, right? Because something shifted. Um, I would hope that that younger version of me would see that and recognize the moments where something valuable came, even when it was unexpected, even when it shouldn't have, even when all the necessary steps hadn't been taken to get there. Um, that reality can be bigger than we realize. And when we're open to that, we can experience more than we expected.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Let me get to kind of the marrow of your bones here. Everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, clients, everyone that knows you is an author and in the ministry and all these different bubbles that you exist in. But you run the real show of what we see. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm in a season right now where the more I am existing in these spaces where most would see me as a content creator, those expectations come with that. That means there should be a certain amount of listeners, and I should be pursuing that. There should be a certain number of readers, and I should be pursuing that. It should be generating a certain amount of income so that it actually makes sense to do and isn't just this hobby that's taking up too much of my time. And over the last couple years, there have been many moments that should have been the moments to kind of uh, speed up that process, or help me to level up, that didn't. Sometimes it seemed to be the opposite, and it can leave me feeling like, man, what am I even doing? Or put another way, it can leave me assuming what others are thinking. Oh, wow. Like, Paul is spending a lot of time on this podcast, but is that really a good use of his time? He's writing these books. Is that really a good use of his time? It can be really easy for me to get more caught up and identify myself more with assumptions, not even actual things, but assumptions of what I think people are saying. And what grounds me is when I remind myself of what I've mentioned a few times here. The purpose of why I do this is not reputation, is not income generation, is not, even putting my mark on the world. I I believe in a scripture that tells a whole lot of stories of people that ended up looking like fools at the end of their human stories. It looked like they hadn't accomplished much. Uh, but there is a value that extends beyond them, extends beyond their credit, extends beyond the impact on their lives. So this is part of the framework of who I am, a willingness to, if I can at the end of the day say that I faithfully showed up, that I was authentic, that I I did the best that I could to live into who I was and what was set before me, then I can have a peace no matter what happens from there. And so, really, that's the core of who then I want to be. I'll put the label content creator on a bio, but I'm just a person that wants to walk alongside other people. I want to be the person that, if I have an opportunity to help someone not feel alone and unheard, that I can do that, whether it's in person or through words that I typed. Um, Now that is hard to be in a world that is filled with bills, expenses, and all these external expectations. But what can then bolster me in those hardest of moments is the moments when there is unsolicited feedback. Recently, there is a friend of mine that has been a friend for a while, been very supportive of me, and would always affirm the work that I've been doing. But they recently got a book of mine to someone close to them that was working through a lot of hard things, and it was starting to impact them. And so then they got the book themselves so they can work through it together. And they reached out to me recently. We're sharing the impact that it was having on them. Um, I did not expect that. It was unsolicited. right? I wasn't saying, hey, somebody give me encouraging words. They chose to do that and they meant it. Like it was coming from a genuine place. Those moments aren't every day, but when they do come, they're often very timely. It's when I'm starting to feel like what am I even doing? Does anybody care about what I'm doing here?
Yeah.
Those are the moments that can help me to remember, okay, I didn't know this impact was happening, but lo and behold, there is fruit coming from these seeds that I just threw into the dirt and didn't see movement. So let me keep on throwing seeds.
Yeah. So speaking of seeds, if anybody wants to reach out, they want to get involved with your content, the good work that you're doing with the ministry, the books, all of the good content, where do they go? How do they
Yeah.
find out?
Yeah. So again, my heart is to cultivate authentic, accessible space, to wrestle with these hard realities of life, these hard questions. And all of that is kind of gathered at wheredidyousee.god.com. I've self-published about 24 books. I have one book coming out through Morgan James Publishing called Something in the Froth. So all of those, the self-publish, all can be found on Amazon. Something in Froth can be found wherever you get books, podcast, wherever you stream podcasts. But it's all in that one space. And again, my heart is not to just throw a bunch of content out there. It's not about self-promotion. It's my hope is more and more I create more and more and more and more touch points where if somebody comes, they can find something of value for them, something that speaks to their situation then. And even better if it's a nuanced space that usually goes untalked about.
I love it. What a great message. Paul, thank you so much. Thank you for taking a minute out today. Best of luck with all the endeavors. It's a lot of light that we need in this world, so thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate the opportunity to talk.
You bet.